Hi folks, I'm on making another video because I just happen to have the tech up right now, and I think I'm going to crack into the encyclopedia while I'm here and give some additional information, some additional quotes. More information about my background within Church Universal and Triumphant. Let me go ahead and turn off Criminal Minds because that's fallen and not appropriate for us in this particular instance, although it makes a few good points despite it being prohibitively violent. Right, I've spent my entire life under the aegis of Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and working with her. At some point in the 80s, a consultant came to rearrange how things operated at the ranch. Not everybody agreed with the developments, okay? Let me give you a little bit of background information because I had a conversation with someone connected to the ranch who didn't understand my involvement or claims not to have understood my involvement. But then I have all these wonderful friends who are, ministers, some reverends online who interact with me and appear to recognize me. I'm not trying to be smug. I just really want to be clear that I'm as much in CT as anybody else, and I am entitled to claim affiliation as other people are entitled to claim affiliation if they hold the mantle in the right fashion. So I've never heard, and when I looked at it, and I talked to some rabbis and a couple people who are ministers exterior to CUT, who are professional religious people such as I am. I've never heard of a church operating where it can say that you don't you're not Hindu or you're not Buddhist. I've never heard of that. And so since it's the Summit Lighthouse, it's a religion. It's available for anybody to open and to use. You'd have to do it the right way. But in my work with that information, to me, it's really a temple, and it's in a way it's an esoteric temple within Theosophy, but also it's its own path. It's also, as I stated in other videos, 8 mystical paths. Um, but um, It's also part of my heart, and it's also my working on inner planes in collaboration with Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and I have the right to claim access also for that reason. But early on, there was a dispute online. When I came in, I was nailed with doing my job like everybody else was doing their job as a great white brotherhood member. And if you are a light bearer, you belong in church. I want to make that clear too. When people come to me and they say you're not affiliated, you have no right. First of all, I don't believe it's the actual spiritual director at the ranch who's saying that. I don't believe all these wonderful friends from the ranch online now. I just don't understand the disconnect, I suppose. And I think a lot of it has to do it's hostility, and sometimes repressed hostility, and sometimes there's a reason people don't recognize you, and they respond in a knee-jerk fashion to the fact that you've swapped out IDs or something else is going on. But there's so many security issues online that everybody sort of has to be super flexible. It's a requirement. But I get people yelling at me sort of periodically too also about um, legal matters that affect them personally. And really what is needed is better integration at the ranch. But the extent to which all that needs to change right now is not at all clear because the church, what I was told last night online when I prayed to the masters and through Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and I don't channel, um, and I also don't, I'm not a UFO supporter to the exclusion of the teaching. But so if people are attacking me because they've seen UFOs posted to my board, I'm not. It's not an endorsement. It's an offer to discuss information. But early on in church, I mean, we used to pray away flying saucers, and we called them Nephilim all the time, aliens in their crafts. I mean, they were one of our spiritual targets, and sometimes they needed to be spiritual targets because everybody was off reading um, uh, Whitley Strieber and not paying attention to the teaching. So I agree with Mother. I do, and I understand esoteric points that I think if you exclude those esoteric points when someone has a component of the information and they have accurate information, you say, well, you're not in church, so you can't participate. You really risk excluding people to your detriment and also to their detriment, sometimes to an extreme extent. So it's important that people are recognized and properly integrated and welcomed the right way. And I'm not sure, when they say I'm not affiliated, I've been working for the church for over 10 years, so I don't understand that at all. But I don't see it as a schism. I see it as a mistake that some long-standing members make because they are holy and they've been dedicated for such a long time. But I think sometimes they have blinders on and they haven't balanced part of their karma, and they don't always recognize mother, and that's no good. They think mother is as some place other where she really is because they've been taught to believe that, or they've convinced themselves that that's the case. When the reality is, mother is manifesting in a different fashion at this point in time because it's what's required under the circumstances. So, sometimes the truth is revealed in untraditional formats, and you have to use extreme discernment, and you have to be very patient and look within yourself to balance all of that. Church is strange. Our church is strange, and it's just a fact. I mean, it's a beautiful, amazing thing, and what you will, if you can dig past sort of the gauntlet. And I know people in church, including family members, who experience this as well, and a lot of them feel isolated or have in the past felt alienated, and I think broken away as a consequence of that gauntlet. It's not the church, it's not Elizabeth. Well, it's not the church to the extent that it's not the administrators at the church, but the extent to which the administrators at the church need to be taken under advisement. It's not entirely clear to me at this juncture, but employment needs to, I've done some labor law on employment and religious discrimination claims, and employment needs to turn in a certain fashion within organizations. It's important that people who are supposed to be compensated are properly compensated. And I could name like 3 or 4 organizations online that really should be paid by Church Universal and Triumphant right now, and that's beyond my own effort. People who are long-standing big donor communicants who do a lot of work on behalf of the church who aren't properly compensated, and it turns into a problem after a while. So, but to the extent to which anybody at the ranch can actually do anything about that at this point in time is unclear. But it's vitally important that everybody remain integrated. It's a requirement. And it's a requirement that you recognize it because the messagerial mantle needs to be maintained in the proper fashion beyond what's going on with politics, restructuring, who's entitled, who's not entitled, all of that. So don't cast people out and calling people fallen. I just watched Erin's presentation. She's saying that one of the things she doesn't want to see is for anybody to be referred to as fallen. I don't want to see anybody in the church kicked out of the church who shouldn't be kicked out of the church. If that's what she means, I agree with her entirely. But I think the family should make it to the ranch. I think I need to get out there, and we need to work together to make sure that things are running in the right direction. Just a fact. Okay, so controversial things to watch. Controversy is interesting because it gets the mind turning in the right direction. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to sacrifice truth, and you don't want to in order to achieve the new stimulation, the new pathways. You don't want to sacrifice truth, to achieve a level of controversy that is going to agitate if you're losing strides. But there's interesting information. I won't even call it controversial. I'll just recommend it. I think it's wrong to exclude Erin's work at this juncture because she talks about a timely. I have communicants coming to me saying that some of the former members are fallen. I think that's unfair and unwise. Additionally, because this Mull suit that Erin's discussing online is timely again and relevant again, and she has a new video out called Erin Prophet on brainwashing in the lawsuit of CUT versus Mull. So this is about when we sued, and what it will say, CUT versus Mull. But the reality is that this morphed into Mull versus Prophet. So she doesn't say the last part of it, and it might be that she made this before that occurred. Well, that wouldn't be possible because this occurred in the 80s, and the suit was actually filed in the 80s. So brainwashing in the lawsuit of CUT versus Mull versus CUT, he countersued the church and won a settlement out of court. And I think it was $1.50. I mean, I think they paid him I think it was $1.5 million. It was over $1 million and under 2. I'm pretty sure it was 1.5. But he sued for, I think it was between 100 and 150 million dollars after being badly treated allegedly. As I stated, it's not the his side of the story isn't the entire story, certainly, but there are other, there are all sorts of perspectives. And as I stated in other videos, all organizations are sued at one point or another, or can be sued, and places are civilly liable just because they're in existence periodically. It's true. Someone walks into your church. If I didn't maintain the floor properly in my church, as an instance, and you walked into my church and you fell and broke your leg, I would expect you to sue me. I would expect you to sue me for not studying what needed to occur to keep you safe within my organization. Everybody's safety is vital to the organization. It's vital that everybody is safely housed at all times. It's vital that people are properly compensated, that all the chakras are encouraged to turn in the right direction. People have access to freedom, wisdom, the heart chakra, all of that. So keeping people out, especially when they're designed to be administrators and are the eventual heirs, is incredibly myopic. So just more information about that. And I made a shorter video that's kind of funny because I had gotten off the phone. I had just been on the phone with, I can't remember who it was in California, but someone who is sort of not really involved in the church a lot anymore, but knows a lot about it. And it's just, we were just laughing at how hard it is to interact still after all these years. But it gets easier the more you pray and the more discernment you develop and the more you realize that we have a mission that is not only one of preservation. It's not simply that sort of Vishnu energy, which I value enormously, but it's also the destroying Shiva energy, where we have to cut new paths, including for the weaker members, and make personal sacrifices so that we can bring those people up. Not everyone. You do have to be a light bearer, as Ma taught, and I believe it does have to be. You do have to. You have to be in the right round, and you have to not be riding on people's coattails, and you have to walk the Christ path and live what I refer to in my mission and work as a life of heroic virtue, meaning that in your heart you're capable. Sure, you might have to balance fear, and other people might have to walk you through the various complex forms of interpersonal relating when it comes to providing a handout to another person. But a life of heroic virtue means that you're willing to make a basic sacrifice, as opposed to a life that is not heroic, where you are permanently a child unless someone comes and does all of the work for you. And I will talk about all of that more deftly when I'm able to actually sit down in a hotel room and not be where I am currently, which is not properly funded and should be at this point. But yeah, when someone comes to you from church and says, I'm having a problem, I'm not compensated, the last thing you want to do is say you're no longer a member, you're not at all affiliated, and your effort is entirely fallen untrue. I have a legal right to correct my relationship with CUT. I have a legal right to assert my rights within the organization, and also a legal right only to follow the correct path. So if the administrators at the ranch are saying something that's wrong, that's too bad. And it's really the Holy Orders people. It falls on the theology at that point to say how the church ought to operate. And that includes people who have been affiliated with the church, who actually have the church in their hearts and in their minds the right way, and are able not to pass judgment, and they're able not to hurt the world mother. There's still a lot of that going on in church, and it's not acceptable. There are chelas and communicants who come to me periodically. I'm not lecturing. I'm saying you have to be very careful about how you interact with members. You have to be respectful of the fact that the member with whom you're speaking is not necessarily you identically at that point in time, but might be someone who you are more like Jermaine and that individual is more like Jesus. You have to have the wisdom to be able to relate to that person as not ready to take necessarily all of your guff or all of your wrath or your punishment. Some people might, who have access to resources, might respect the fact that someone cuts them off. But someone who's very impoverished and vulnerable and is still operating a church, or still has access to holy information, still bearing the mantle, still progressive revelation, all of that, and who is vulnerable needs to be respected and treated in a different manner. Otherwise, you run into a lot of problems. You run into a lot of karmic problems. And ultimately, it won't be the person you nail, inadvertently or otherwise, who experiences the loss, but it'll be yourself personally based upon karmic loss. You have to be very careful. So, although I think some people look like they're not in church, and some people say that maybe, and also the church has said recently that they're going to do this whole new thing with micro communities. I agree with that in principle, but we also need to strengthen the core understanding about how the church operates, who's quote unquote in charge. By that I mean who has sort of the top alpha level information. And sure, it's Elizabeth Clare Prophet, but people lose track of exactly who that is, including the long-standing communicants. Sometimes it's developmental. They no longer remember in their hearts and their minds the reality of Mother's true nature. And you have to understand that she has the Father light, and you also have to understand, as I stated, who she is, and you also have to respect the presence of the World Mother, who is that vulnerable older person, younger person, disabled person within the church who's holy, but gets steamrolled a lot by the Copyright Office, who gets run over by lack of funding, who gets ignored when it comes to the conferences, who is able to contribute materially to the magisterium but is never compensated for a plane ticket. All those problems, great places to start in the new year to resolve. So moving forward, that's my recommendation, is that we start to look at how we get around and get on, including for the vulnerable members. I've been talking about this for so many minutes. It's really to repair the fact that there's a problem. Again, I don't think it's a full-blown schism. It's that people don't want to be mistreated. I believe, Aaron said that in 2008 from Minnesota, Montana or Minnesota, Bozeman actually, that she had been cordially uninvited to the ranch. So that's no good. But I think I've seen photographs of them making it back there. That was 14 years ago at this point, her Bozeman lecture was, but it's still relevant to this day. So I would include that if you're interested. I mean, inform yourself. Understand like what people are doing and talking about at the church. But I think understand and be respectful of other people's experience too, and that, yeah, we're all the same in a way. We're all cut from the same cloth in a way. That is true. That is true. We are all the men who are Jesus, and the women who are Jesus, and we have seen Jesus in our presence. It's it's an amazing opportunity, but it has to be an inclusive one. And a church also exists on the inner planes as well. So I got a message that you're no way. And it wasn't. I mean, this guy has his own. He's affiliated with a separate effort, I think, and it's like you're no way affiliated. I don't understand what that means if I'm a member of Holy Orders. It makes no sense. And he has no right at all to excommunicate or to pass judgment. But they need to make that very clear in all the recordings. Rather, in all their efforts, it needs to be clear that we're not to behave that way. If you have to kick people out and you have to, then there's something wrong with your security that doesn't have to do with that other individual. It's really that if someone is saying I'm TSL, I'm all of this, and it looks then it must be. I mean, it must be that they are. And why? What's the damage with claiming that you are? And if you actually read and processed my information, you'd realize that it's in line with what Guruma teaches, and that I'm reading directly from Scripture. And I don't see why that's not valuable, and I don't see why it can be shunted. It looks like I'm lecturing. I'm going to discontinue that and try to actually get into that's not a necklace, it's actually part of my headphones. Okay, so let's try to get into some more information. But yeah, don't kick people out. And by that I mean, as I said, light bearers. There's a difference between light bearers, laggards, and the fallen. Use discernment, but understand that if it's a light bearer, the light bearer belongs in church. and that light bearer's effort needs to be protected because it's a holy individual who's trying to help other people on the path. So what's this? But to say that it's a church that's limited to just a bunch of people who were termed worthy by an exterior consultant, that's not true, because the Elmore information, when Elizabeth retired or was forced to retire, see, it's not at all clear that that was a smooth transition. It's not. It's not clear from a legal standpoint. And I mean, I can go in and when Aaron's done talking about brainwashing in the context of church, which is an allegation but not an actual thing. It's not the church that's doing it. As I stated, brainwashing is an important topic, but the church, it's not our church that is executing that at all. If someone felt hurt, that I'm not saying there wasn't loss, and I'm not saying that we weren't liable under these. By we, I mean the church weren't liable under these circumstances at all. But brainwashing really has to be talked about openly in terms of mimetic engineering and problems that are going on within the military and civilian hospitals within this country, torturing people to death. And I've attempted to sue over that. But as I said last night in my other video that I made, where I was momentarily emboldened by my conversation with my friend, former church member, that you also can't block out people from a church when they're benefiting from the information, in part because you start to obstruct justice at a certain juncture if there are outstanding legal problems, and that can be dangerous. To smack someone around and say you're not in church, you're not authorized, all of that, it can be dangerous if that person falls back and no longer has a grasp on what it is that needed to be done at that point. There's all this additional loss, which is why we need reverends to be conscientious, family members to be supportive where possible, and much more discernment as well. So the ranch is, security at the ranch is like this ongoing issue, and it needs to be battened down. Holy things to discuss, and as I said, I made a list of. It's important that I think people fall into the decrees and the Mark sermons, mother stumping, all of that at the right juncture, and that for that to happen, I made a list of a playlist on YouTube that I will post. It just says whatever one playlist of the CCT. So there are probably 10 or 12 selections within that playlist that should be used. The Aaron information can be used at this point, and I'll take a look at how Mull ties into what's going on with this other issue, other legal issues. No one's in any particular sort of trouble. It's that I have to work harder, and sometimes to my detriment, if the wheels aren't greased properly, and if the way isn't paved, the path has to be paved. For me and for other Chilas too. So, but yeah, and inheritance works in an odd way, and copyright laws work in an odd way, and legal institutions interact legally in bizarre ways where periodically, particularly in churches, I'm getting yelled at for referring to the Heart Center. I just refer to the Heart Center. I'm wise enough not to make an overarching evaluation about the validity of the Heart Center. And Temple of the Presence, I can't exclude all the Temple of the Presence information because some of it is identical to ours. So when someone tells me no Temple of the Presence, well, what does that mean? Like, does it mean that all the Johans have changed for Summit now? What you're saying is that Temple of the Presence isn't the actual authority, and in some instances you're right, and in some instances you're not, right? Because the person who had the information at the church, who knew about the second ray Johan being Mark Prophet, received that information from Temple of the Presence because nobody was at the wheel at the Summit Lighthouse at the time, and she's in the Summit Lighthouse, and she just happens to know that that's right. I know it's right. So when's the rest of the magisterium going to come together? We haven't said it as much. But at that point, Temple of the Presence had the right information. It's like with the United Nations. If the Constitution of America fails, and the UN is the only place to come in, as much as you hate the UN, if the UN comes in and says you can't torture people in mental hospitals anymore, then you have to listen to the UN because the US isn't being responsive. It's just a fact. The mother agrees with it, and it's a reality. It's a fact that they had the right information at that point in time. So yeah, I don't think we should. I don't think at all that we should bow to Temple of the Presence authority, but we need to strengthen our own inner authority so that we can track our magisterium where it's actually unfolding, as opposed to people doing what I think is occurring, and that is partitioning off information, stating that you can't claim it, you can't use it, but when it comes time for them for that information to hit the mat, even when it's going to benefit the individual who had previously been hoarding, if you will, it won't have any effect because you will have shut your heart to the people, the other light bearers who could have actually helped in those moments. So yes, it's a temple. Yes, it's hermetic. Yes, absolutely, people should have their own. If you specialize in certain forms of knowledge, or you know about um, the charismatic, um, if you know about the gift of tongues, or you know about whatever it is you study, and however it is you worship, is so vital and important and holy. I support projects where individuals are able to evolve, absolutely. But you want to do it in a way that it ensures that the Summit Lighthouse is the Summit Lighthouse properly, free of wrongful attachments to components of ego, where it says that only certain people can belong, free to immoral and unlawful administrative practices, not necessarily present at the ranch, but that have been present in the ranch in the past, likely, where people have said, mother isn't really important anymore, mother really isn't in charge anymore, and here's how we're going to do it. I don't really believe that everybody is their own guru, as El Morya allegedly said at near the end of Mother's career path, but it doesn't fully reflect the reality that there is a Jesus. It's not. It will never be the case that everybody at Church Universal and Triumphant is some sort of set of perfected people, or there's always going to be a Jesus or a mother figure, a guru figure. Unfortunately, that's just it's the reality of alchemical law and chakra law. If you're acephalic at this point, the organization is not going to run the right way. If you don't recognize mother, in whatever form she's manifesting, it's going to be problematic. There is a guru in the church. There's a guru-centered church, and I don't believe that it's fair or proper to say, yes, you may be your own guru, you may claim that you're your own guru, certainly, but a guru is really part of a lineage, and a guru also holds a component of the Christ light that is not necessarily held by everybody, even if you're a hugely highly evolved communicant, a savior in another universe maybe, I'm not sure, but on this planet it's really Jesus. And the guru, a Jesus-like person may manifest periodically in Shiva form, like Yogiraj or Nityananda, or I would say Anandamayi Ma, Shiva form of guru, because they are a form of Christ. The reverends at the church, I think they do have Christ in their hearts, and they are Jesus. That's true, but guru is more angelic than Jesus because it's more power and more authority. Why? It's more responsibility. The guru is balancing debt and supplying services, if you will, that are at the level of the Jesus who is sacrificed. In other words, has made sacrifices on his or her path that benefit everybody within that church, because that guru is really like an avatar, really like the father or the mother of a particular union of people, a particular group of people, a particular nation. And if you study the Bible, you'll see that bears out. So when Mother retired or was forced to retire, And the guy said, well, Al-Moria said it's everybody is their own guru. Well, that's great to an extent. It's great to be free. It's great to feel emboldened and empowered. But don't say that you're the guru if you really do need direction from a guru, and you look to your brethren at the Summit Lighthouse, and they're in that moment not able to balance for you, which will happen periodically. It's not who's more powerful, who's more loved by God at all, but it's who has the mantle. It has to do with who has the mantle, and it's just what how I recommend we move forward is getting a grip on what all that means. Okay, so let's take a look at some of this information then. But yeah, people want to complain. Like if people want me to pass on information, I mean, I've seen church members, just young church members, get tossed out by. It's happened. I've fielded complaints on that topic a number of times to the point at which someone needs to probably say something directly there in Montana. So what is all this? Okay, there's a guy teaching about the Gospel of Thomas, and he's teaching from Yale, I believe, and that might be interesting. I've looked a little bit online at Eckhart recently, but I don't really understand all of it. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to, and I don't know how to, I guess, I said in my earlier video too not to banish, but you have to banish the fallen, and I need help, I guess, with what's going on in Washington, because those people, one or two people there have been there for so long that you can basically blame her for the death of your neighbor's cat. You know, she's got her dirty paws in everybody's business, and it's just nasty. She cares not about the world mother. She cares not about the most vulnerable. She will turn her back on people who have been raped. It's a nightmare. So they have to clean up their act in Washington, and I'm sick of having to compromise, and I'm sick of watching people get hurt. But I can only do so much if the courts are not going to pony up, and if I'm expected to pay for everything out of pocket, we're all going to lose out, because I don't have the resources to help. Now, it's like with being a lawyer, though, it doesn't mean that you're somehow booted out of the church because you're not rich and you're not out working for the man. You still have an obligation to do your pro bono monthly hours. And what I see sometimes, I think, lovely, wonderful reverends who work hard, and some of them I think work too hard, as I stated, but also people kind of straggling and who are not working to the fullest of their capacity, not doing what I think, I'm not saying there should be a system with in law we call it CLE, continuing legal education, and you have to fulfill a certain number of credits in order to maintain your license. In many instances, I actually teach CLE, but yeah, the reverends I think need to get hip to victims assistance training, because you are a church. We are a church, you are a church. When someone comes to you, it's like at the Catholic Church, someone comes in and says, I was sexually assaulted, or there's domestic violence. You can't say, not my problem. You can't, otherwise you're not a church. So we don't have organizations in this country where you can just turn your back on people who are being injured. It's not legal, and it's corrupt, and so we need help with victims assistance training, and I encourage people to hire the right sorts of consultants to deal with that problem up at the ranch. So, don't you guys know Barry and stuff? Like, isn't there a guy up there who does like security up there? I don't know. I mean, I would think that you guys would need to hire beyond the tight circle that we seem to be maintaining. I think agitating like the pool of applicants is a really great idea, but not all the applicants are going to make it in time to be helpful to the World Mother if you're going to say you have to be level 7 in order to apply, or level 5, whatever that is, because not everybody can afford to pay. And really, Mother as Jesus is going to be extremely poor and broken and not able to cough up $100 to join online lessons. And that's just the reality. It's not her fault. It's the reality of the situation. You're obligated to assist her and to put her needs ahead of how you're structuring your university. So we're looking at that a little bit, and I think that's basically what I'm going to say for right now. And then let me think for a minute. What else is going on? Right, Mull letters negotiation. I don't understand the context for it, but she has bullet points up here from the timeline, and really the problem started in 1975, where he threatened to leave CUT if he didn't get an apology, and then this went on for 5 years. Well, I'll provide the link under this particular video. Let me get to some other information. Okay, let's say right, and you want the guy who's like the libertarian guy and the guy who will protect freedom too. You want to make sure that the people that you're hiring really know a lot about law and the Constitution, because we protect the Constitution and we support the Constitution, and you want a constitutional lawyer dealing with your problems, and not just someone who's there because it's traditional that he or she utilize that particular spot. So, okay, so Saint Germain, U.S. Constitution allows path of union with God. This is directly from the summitlighthouse.org. Okay, I'm going to read it. Saint Germain's plan for the United States. Elizabeth Clare Prophet wrote, "It is America's destiny to be the comforter nation, to fulfill the mandate given through the prophet Isaiah. Comfort ye, my people, saith your God." Our forefathers founded alliteration this nation, or the principle of the comforter. The comfort of the unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is the opportunity to walk the path of individual Christhood and to enjoy the fruits of one's sacred labor in the abundant life. America is the place set apart from all nations where God's people were called to raise up an ensign, a sign. That sign is the sign of the I Am Presence, individual Christhood. It foretells the coming of the standard bearer. America's individual by individual and heart by heart, is sent by God to be the standard bearer of the path of the individual Christhood, bringing that path to the nations of the world, to all who would receive us, even as one of the least of these, the brethren of the Lord. Receive the least, which is what's not occurring if someone says they're not part of the Summit Lighthouse, and that has nothing to do with you. I command you to leave. You can't command me to leave because I'm the least. You have to receive the least. America is the nation sponsored by the ascended masters of the Great White Brotherhood, who have come because Saint Germain has raised up his standard of freedom on those shores. Here then is an experiment of freedom. We gather together through the master/disciple relationship under Jesus Christ and the apostles, Moses and the prophets, Gautama Buddha and the Bodhisattvas, all of whom trace their lineage to the Ancient of Days. America is destined to bring forth the culture of the Divine Mother that was once on Lemuria and Atlantis and in previous Golden Age civilizations. The founding pyramid of her civilization is the path of the soul's reunion with the Divine Mother. See? With the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother is really the World Mother. I call her the World Mother sometimes, but so do the pearls. The capstone of the pyramid is the highest spiritual teaching of East and West, which Gautama Buddha and Jesus Christ taught to their disciples. But in order for the capstone to be placed on the pyramid, That lost teaching must be regained and embodied heart by heart through the Lord our righteousness, whom we address as our beloved Holy Christ self. On the path of the putting on of the garment of the Lord, the sons of God in America must become the living word if we are to see the sealing of the capstone of this civilization. Through the teachings of the chart of your divine self, which unfold the path of the individual Christhood or the path of the Bodhisattva, I'll discover the foundation and the consummation of America's identity. Actually, it's the consummation of America's destiny. Saint Germain teaches that Americans are called upon to champion every man's right to joint heirship with Jesus Christ of the presence of the great I Am. Under the Master's sponsorship, Americans have a destiny, a dharma, if you will, to bear the flame of liberty, the four sacred freedoms, and the example of representative government and free enterprise to the nations of the world. They are sent to teach, working side by side with the people, that those who have the right to govern as God's overmen. It does say overmen as kind of a neologism, but I guess it's not a neologism. It's a term, overmen, all one word. And let me restart. They are sent to teach, working side by side with the people, that those who have the right to govern as God's overmen are those who have disciplined themselves before Christ in a sacred labor by which they serve the people, and in the process balance the threefold flame and transmute personal and planetary karma, thereby earning by grace the right to wear the Lord's mantle, his authority to rule. The true representatives of the people in every race and nation are the anointed of God, i.e. the Christed ones who have raised up the light of the ancient days within their temples. These anointed have come to America's shores to fulfill a soul destiny, and they or their descendants must one day return in spirit or in person to their point of origin to deliver the light of the Goddess of Liberty to their people and their nations. Yesterday I talked about the Goddess of Liberty. It's interesting that's coming up today. Without the freedom, that's Mary's message for the new year. That she wanted that for Jesus this time. The Goddess of Liberty, she mentioned it specifically. Without the freedoms we enjoy in America today, protected by law, secured by divine right, there can be no individual path of soul testing or initiation into the soul's union with God. Without the freedom to create with God, the entering into the word and work, the Alpha and Omega of the Lord, there's no living spirit of America, and by definition, there are no Americans. Without the freedom to create with God, there are no Americans. So the most American thing that you can do is to support someone on their path when they fully hold the mantle, irrespective, again, of whether or not how the guy dresses, of how old or young he is, where he's from. If the person is walking in the light, he's walking with the light. You have to include it. It's un-American to drop kick someone out of church because you don't recognize them, and you don't recognize the authority of mother within that person. You have to learn that it's mother, principally, first and foremost. Okay, and so Pearls of Wisdom, they'll give you a link to volume 31, number 9. And this is excerpted from Pearls. I quoted directly from Elizabeth Clare Prophet on February 28th, 1988. Again, this is directly from the Summit Lighthouse. It's official information, and the topic header is Saint Germain, U.S. Constitution allows path of union with God. That's all I'm going to do for now because I want to get a quick response out today so I can put this under Aaron's work. Namaste. It's Ben Turner, Order of St. Joseph, and I hope that we will be working again soon together in the near future. And to everybody who's doing a really good job, I think everybody is doing a really good job. To the extent that my opinion matters, there are places where I think that we can tighten up our forms of interaction so that more people are helped more effectively, and the least among us can be assisted as opposed to being shunted to the side and made to wait. I don't agree with making people wait. Okay, when they don't want to wait. Namaste, and I will talk to you folks later. Thank you again. Bye.